Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Smallville Season 1, Episodes 13 and 14. So, I feel instead of, saying that Smallville will be put out every other day, that just kind of feels goofy to do that anyways. Especially with the view count, but also the fact of, there's bigger things out there than Smallville that eventually are to kind of have a life of their own. And so, yeah, I'm going to continue to try to come back to Smallville, but also I need to push on and also do other things as well. I think Smallville will probably end up being kind of one of those icebreaker kind of videos where it's like, hey, if I need to go on and really have a burnout day where I'm just kind of I don't know where exactly to go with the channel on that day, plop, there's another Smallville review. Because there's sometimes where it just kind of takes me hours to just be like, okay, what is the perfect video to go out for the day? And a perfect video doesn't exist. But it's always just the hunt for the perfect video where that really doesn't exist. So Smallville will be a casual thing, but hey, at the end of the day, I'm still gonna try to put these out. So, because this is a recap anyways, and a lot of times I don't have enough insights or behind the scenes of every little detail of every episode, because of course a lot of times Talkville is where to really get that. Anyways, so plus also there was to be an interview recently done on the YouTube channel Michael Rosenbaum's Inside of You, where he ended up doing an interview with a girl who ends up playing Mercy by the tail end of the Smallville season, around, I believe, season 8 is when she comes in. And I really liked her interview. I liked when she was to talk about how, she, of course, didn't fit into the later seasons. She ended up befriending Tom, and, they shared some beers, and she, of course, was to also kind of talk about stuff just kind of beyond just Smallville, and I thought that was kind of cool. To kind of have her kind of in general talk about things, because Michael tends to do those kinds of interviews, as well as well, hey, can't we just kind of talk about this movie? I just wanna, and then it's oh, okay. So anyways, we also find out that Annette, Martha, who's in this show, is also on Virgin River, and so go ahead and check that out if you're just a fan of this show and retroactively finding any number of other things. But anyways, let's go into these episodes. I apologize for that long-winded intro. So, what happens in episode 13 and 14 via the condensed version? The teed up version, as I always say. Speaking of teeing up, we have this episode to be focused upon Whitney, who is to lose his sports scholarship and end up in a sporting store, or maybe a possible general store that is to only be showing us the sports section. Not quite sure, but also I didn't catch the name of the store that, of course, Whitney was working in, because I didn't think it would be important. So I can go on and say that, yeah, this is mainly a Whitney episode, but there also is some Lex things going on also, because Whitney and Lex are kind of tied together. And then in episode 14, we already are to focus on a story that was kind of told before in a number of episodes, which is to be revealed now. When we go on and we had that episode with Kyle and Rickman, where the guy ends up kind of sewing up Kyle and saying that he had kind of taken care of Lex before and kind of sewn him up when he ended up getting stabbed at this club. Come to find out, we end up doing that story within episode 14, where, come to find out, Lex is to be haunted by his past, and to eventually reveal that Lex was to have gone on and killed somebody. Or did he? Or did he? Did he kill someone? And so we also come to find out a part of Clark here that eventually, somewhere down the road, we get to know more of the story of. Where, of course, Chloe at some point in this episodes is to reveal to Clark about his birth certificate and how this kind of orphanage that Clark had been in really had only existed for a very limited time and had closed its doors. Well, there's a whole reasoning for that, which eventually I think I ended up saying in the early parts of these reviews anyways. So you can probably go on and check that out somewhere, where I think I ended up saying exactly what that story is about. Jonathan needing to go on, and there's a whole reason why he does not go to trust the Luthers. So, anyways, let's just go on and eventually, like, let's go possibly into spoilers. Like, I really quickly teed all of this up. Let me go in a little bit more. Lana has a really interesting story also going on in these episodes, where it seems that Lana cannot go or let go of her parents, like, in some kind of way, with it seems that the Talon getting sold. With Nell going on and saying, like, yeah, I think I'm going to go on and sell the flower shop and the cinema, because it seems that Nell cannot compete with having one cinema open compared to a multiplex, and so on and so forth. So Lana has to go on and trying to convince Lex to save these things, and then Lex is to need to know the real reasoning why. It's like, why should I go on? And, like, if anything, like, the town needs a parking garage, and what do I need to save these places for? And then immediately we have Lana, who's just like, well, but my parents! And Lex is like, I don't give a about your parents. I don't give a rip about your parents. I'm sorry. Like, plus, like, for Lex to really keep this thing alive, there has to be a good enough reason. And Lana will eventually deliver that within these episodes. We also have some interesting things going on with Chloe, where she is snooping around to eventually find things about Clark. And Clark is to go on and consistently try and duck and dodge and duck and weave and bob and whatever to try to get around Chloe's questions, because Clark is afraid that eventually, if he goes on and he tells a lie to Chloe, and then Chloe goes on and asks Clark's parents will go on and eventually have a different answer to what Clark had said, and then all of a sudden, that's when we start to weave and bob and whatever and realize that Clark may accidentally lie to Chloe, and he doesn't mean to, but he may not actually know the answer, because also known as Krypton. One thing that on Talkville that they caught that I didn't catch, that Tom didn't even catch while they were filming this, there was the one joke about Chloe who is to mention that Clark, it's like, well, hey, what do you live on, like an ice planet? Where it's kind of funny, like, we have Clark and Jonathan and Martha with so many, like, they're a farmer's family, but they're wearing like coats, gloves, all these layers, and, like, Clark is to have supposedly lived for a brief moment on this ice planet, and he also is to, like, wear sweaters and layers and whatever, and I'm just like, okay, this makes no sense. I think at some points they do, like, break away from that, But yeah, like there's an absurd amount of layers going on for a number of these characters, and like I get it. It like they always have to wear something nice and formal for a show and whatever. But I just always see it as like, why are these people wearing layers all the time? Um, when it looks like Canada may just be very cold there where they're filming in Vancouver. That might just be the case. Where Canada just might be very cold. I don't know. Anyways, pushing on. So, little funny tidbits, but it is what it is. So, let's go on into that double five time territory. Let's just go into spoilers, because it's about that time again to go in spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about that time again to spoil this episodes. Anyways, let's go on into episode 13. So, in the beginning of this episode, we have, of course, Clark having this camera on Lex, and wouldn't it have been funny if one of these characters had actually directed this episode? I thought that would actually have been nice if one of them actually directed, like if Tom or Michael or Chloe or whatever, or Allison went on and directed this episode, and we have the camera here. Anyways, we have Chloe, who is starting to ask Lex all these questions, and Lex is like, well, are we rolling? So we have Lex and Chloe that are starting to like bounce questions back and forth, and the first one ends up being about like the level 3 from the episode before about the jitters. And we, of course, have Lex, who is to not really answer that question and is to immediately walk off, stating that he has a problem that he has to go on and resolve here. So that all of a sudden leaves Clark and Chloe to kind of make the consensus. It's like, well, like, did he really have something to do, or was he just trying to avoid the question? So we have Clark and we have Chloe, who are in the midst of 3 thieves making their way into this environment. These 3 thieves are to actually go on and be Derek, Wade, and I believe Scott, because there's no picture here, of these 3 thieves. Interestingly enough, Wade's girlfriend in this episode, just a little tidbit, is actually Angeline Lilly, who, of course, a lot of people probably know from Ant-Man and the Wasp, Ant-Man movie, Lost. I was like, wow, like, I didn't even notice that until I went into IMDb, because I was just very not realizing that at all. But it was kind of cool to just see that within this episode here, so go on, recheck that out if you also missed that also. So, Derek, Wade, and Scott make their way into the Luther Mansion, and so what happens is these 3 men go on to attack Clark and Chloe. And immediately what I see here is Clark's powers are now dulled, and he has the green veins within his hand, which I think that's really a cool effect, especially in this episode. And like in some of the other episodes, but this one was actually, like, it looked pretty good. So, but I was kind of like, really, Clark doesn't have, like, the power to take down these 3 men? But there's a whole story to this, so I understand. So, because come to find all 3 of these men are to have kryptonite tattoos. They're not exactly the best looking tattoos, they're heavily generic, because when really looking at it, they have to be. Or otherwise, you would have to go on and you would have to spend a ton of money for some kind of image copyrighted thing, because that's always what happens also in all these kinds of stuff or things. There always has to be some kind of copyright thing that eventually it's like, hey, that's my thing, I'm going to blah blah blah, I'm going to sue. Because that's my tattoo that they didn't pay me for somewhere. Anyways, so Derek, Wade, and Scott are attacking both Clark and Chloe. And so what ends up playing out here is with one of the burglars. We have them go on to kind of thrust Chloe out this window. Chloe breaks the window, ends up falling what we would naturally assume is to quite possibly be her death, but no, it is not to be the case. She is to just be in a hospital with this arm in a sling, and Clark is then rush out to see that Chloe is injured, and he's like, oh my god, like the one person that I failed to save because we're having save points in the Talkville podcast, and I didn't save Chloe. Oh no. So Tom realizes, or Clark realizes, because that's who it is. Clark Kent is to realize that he did not go on and save Chloe. He's mortified by it, to the point of him realizing if he can't go on and save somebody early in this episode, that he has to go on and try to save someone else. Like, this is, like, weirdly, like, as if, like, Clark is starting to become like this person who is to like be this like soul saving person that is to try and like realize someone's going down a bad path and he needs to correct that, as if it's kind of like Quantum Leap in a way, where Clark is to go on and need to correct something that had once been that had gone wrong, and the next leap he'll go on and because Quantum Leap is coming out soon anyways. And that is great. I've been so jazzed about hearing that coming out because I liked the original show, but we'll see how that pans out. I'm going to try to get to it when it comes out because I really like Quantum Leap anyways. And Scott, I'm hoping Scott Bakula is at least on the show because the guy who played Al, sadly enough, passed away. And I liked Quantum Leap. It was a great show. Anyways, pushing on. So, I don't know how I tied Quantum Leap in here, but it is what it is. Sci-fi shows. Anyways, so we have the thieves go into pulling a Kitty Pryde kind of maneuver where they just walk through these this in this case, this safe, that eventually we'll find out this location that Clark has his safe room, or that Lex, let me get that correctly, Lex has this safe room in. We'll come to find out that this safe room that Lex has is going to get used a plethora of different times within this show, within this season. And so them using it here is no different. So these thieves go on and commandeer all of this jewelry, but then are to also see the real payday, which is to be this disc. Come to find out, when the three of them go on to escape out of here, they then realize that the thing that is to be on this disc is somehow Lex had figured out a way to get into the LexCorp website to try to, I guess, sneak on to try and get some information about Luthor Corp that maybe Lex can go on and use against Lionel at some point. So eventually that leads Derek, Wade, and Scott to say, like, well, hey, we're going to blackmail Lex to get a payday out of him. So, but these three guys, after they celebrate and have this party and beer and celebration and whatever, they then realize that the kryptonite tattoos for them are starting to wear thin, are starting to wear out, and they can't just go on and just put a new tattoo on. No, they need to go on and they need to get a new guy, a new companion that is to come with them on their quests of thievery and false city. Anyways, so we have Clark that makes his way to this sports store to go on and talk to Whitney. Because, of course, Clark wants to, again, always try to do the right thing. And, oh, we also found out that Lex, he did not call the police on these three guys because there was a whole reason for that. Even though I think Clark does go on and question whether or not Lex did call the police originally. So, but Clark is to go on and talk to Whitney, and Whitney here is to mention how he's going to be stuck at this dead-end town, and that he's so angry that he's stuck there, and because his scholarship didn't pan out, and so now he's going to be working at this store until he has a heart condition like his father, and he croaks and dies. Still having Whitney tie in to his father and his heart condition, I'm like, good continuity for this show. Like, I like how we consistently keep tying stuff in from previous episodes. Like, I wouldn't say like I would have that all of the time, because that eventually just starts to get like, really, like, we're still going along with tying every single little thing, so there has to be some kind of setup of some little story, so within the next number of episodes they have to go on and clarify that, so that way they can always have like a way to write another episode. That honestly just seems like lazy writing, but like when really looking at it, shows are hard, and this show is very complex to review also. Hence why I would need the things that I need to be able to figure out what is even going on in a good portion of these episodes, because it kind of goes all over the place. There's so many things to do here in this show, which is great. So Clark goes on and is to talk to Whitney because he is of course needing something for his parents, and then Whitney's there, and so they're just kind of chit-chatting. So Whitney then goes on to find these men who are to be these thieves, and so Wade is to go on and talk to Whitney and like, hey, yeah, like you have a scholarship, right? Like, things are going well for you, right? And Whitney's like, yeah, like that didn't go out the way it planned. Like I have, yeah, I'm gonna go on and have like nothing here. So Wade's like, well, hey, how about you just kind of like join us and kind of blow off some steam, and eventually we're gonna push you into becoming like kind of a Lost Boy kind of character, because of course we had the Lost Boy poster that was in one of the episodes from prior. We now have like Whitney technically being a Lost Boy like character who's going to be tempted or persuaded to be a villainous character, but eventually we find that Whitney does have some morals, and it seems that the quarterback is not going to eventually sink too low into where we're going to have his story go here. So Wade is to go on and like, you know what, like that sounds great, like I'll go on and meet you guys later on tonight. So when he goes on and boozes his way through a number of Wade and Derek and Scott and all these other people at this bar, it seems that Whitney is to be the king of beer pong, because when you immediately just toss this pong into a giant into this giant thing of beer, this whole pitcher of beer, yeah, like that doesn't seem all that complicated. But I just thought that was funny. Plus that was actually technically a funny and good joke there. Where it's just like, dunk, hey, I'm like the best at king pong or beer pong, king pong. So Whitney then turns around and is to be beard up and seduced in some way about him going on to becoming one of these men, and so he ends up getting a kryptonited tattoo, which leads them to go into this street tunnel to then toss Whitney over the side here, to then have Whitney, who is to have to become the truck, and kind of like be the ball kind of thing. So Whitney is to get supposedly ran over by this vehicle, and he doesn't feel it, and he's like, oh my god, this is great. So he immediately ends up becoming one of them, one of the thieves, one of the burglars. So now we transition to having Clark make his way to Chloe in the hospital, and he's still heartbroken by the fact he did not go on and save her because Clark just is to be tallying all of those save points, and he lost one this day. He lost one. So Clark is going on to meet with Chloe, and Chloe is to say, it's like, well, hey, Clark, you know what? Like, I do blame you for not saving me, Clark, as well as I also, like, blame you for, like, all these historical events that you weren't even alive for, that, like, you also, like, did not chime in and save the day then. Really having Chloe telling Clark, it's like, hey, man, you're off the hook. Like, so what? Like, you can't go on and miraculously save everybody, even though when Chloe is immediately in trouble, she always shouts out for Clark as if Clark is to be the only one in the whole entire place that she is to be in, like she did in the episode Cool, whereas, of course, Chloe is to just have the knee-jerk thing to be yelling out for Clark again, even though Lex could still be in his mansion, just kind of chilling out and relaxing, wearing his purple sweater, and just be like, am I supposed to do something? Am I supposed to be somewhere? Am I supposed to be doing an interview with people? Is that supposed to happen in this review? I don't know. Anyways, so Clark and Chloe have this really nice moment, and so we then go from that nice moment to having this kind of very evilish moment with Whitney here. And so Clark goes on and is to have another chit chat with Whitney. And so come to find out, Whitney's wearing these sunglasses. He's looking super cool. And honestly, like, you can probably think that the whole him wearing sunglasses thing looks weird. But honestly, when really thinking about it, again, think of Lost Boys, when immediately when anyone would become a vampire, they'd be wearing the sunglasses. But then on top of that, there's a lot of people with light sensitivity, and with this guy possibly having a hangover, maybe his eyes hurt. I know there's a consistent amount of times where I easily get migraines, and I wear sunglasses for that purpose. So there can be a justifiable amount of reasons besides Whitney looking cool here. But again, like, to me, I'm still thinking of, like, Lost Boys within this episode. And plus also, Tom went on to say that whenever they were to try to pull things from anywhere, they would try to pull them from movies or film and not try to do similar things that all the other shows were doing. And I guess that at that time was to try and make them stand out for the show. So that was kind of cool to just be like, well, yeah, if we are going to go on and pull from some stuff, like, we're gonna go on and, like, try to, like, take these ideas from movies and stuff that's already, like, existing out there and just roll with it and have fun. So Clark is realizing that Whitney is now be possibly forever changed, as he is to be this more menacing character that is to be upset with Clark. And I still don't think that we really have the Whitney and Clark moment that I really want, where Whitney is to go on and, like, really be very upset that it feels like Clark is to consistently be trying to snag Lana here. And we don't have that moment where Whitney is to just be, like, grabbing Clark and just be like, you know what, I'm so sick of you. And I'm so sick of you, like, prowling around on Lana. I know that you're doing it. I've seen the dailies. I've seen the scenes that I'm not in. Don't tell me that you're not trying to, like, trying to sneak a peek at Lana. with some visions, of course, that you are to have. Don't tell me, Clark. So we also have a moment where when Clark is to talk to Lex is to go on and mention that I guess the Smallville Savings and Loan had been robbed by these three burglars. And I'm like, man, like, Smallville Savings and Loan cannot just, like, catch a break. That is the exact same bank that ended up getting robbed from the one girl who was the changeling from the other episode. And I'm like, man, could you just imagine anybody going on into Smallville Savings and Loan and just be like, dude, I'm just going to close my account. Like, you guys have been robbed too often here. Like, I'm just gonna take my money elsewhere because it doesn't like make sense anymore to like this place continues to be robbed. I can't trust that my money is gonna really be here. Plus, also when looking at a bank now, like everything is really just digital money for the most point, and so yeah, very rarely are you gonna go on and really have like a bank that has huge amounts of money as much as they used to. Anyways, but let's go into it. So we have eventually where Clark is to realize that the men that are to be around Whitney are to be very suspicious. So Clark starts to follow them and is to eventually have this lead to having Clark meeting up with the burglars or the thieves and Lex. Lex is going on and trying to pay these guys out as a blackmail because, of course, the thieves had gone on to greet Lex at his home to tell him, like, hey, we're going to blackmail you because we know about that disc, so give us a huge chunk of change and so on and so forth, and we'll be out of your hair. So this is the part where it's the payout for that. So Lex is to go on and give these people the money, and Whitney is trying to go on and do the right thing here because he didn't know what was really going on here. We, of course, have Wade, who's like kind of grabbing Whitney as like, hey, come with us, rookie. Like you're not just gonna go on and like and reveal who you are here, because that'll also like say who these guys are. So there is a moment, of course, where we have Clark who is to ask Lex, it's like, well, hey, did you call the police before? Like, is anybody looking into this? So on and so forth. And Lex is just like, no, I thought if I could pay these guys off. It's like, well, that's the thing about blackmail. A lot of times, like, things just don't, like, go away. And that's what happens with a lot of these kinds of things, sadly. So... and hopefully that never really happens to anybody, but happens. Anyways, so Clark eventually is to have a heart-to-heart with Whitney to try and convince him to not go on and be, like, evil and whatever, and... because we have Clark and we have Lex, and Lex is probably thinking, it's like, well, I think Whitney's, like, if he is going to be as evil as they are, and the quarterback is going to go on to do this, then, like, he'll have to go down as well as the rest of them. But so Clark ends up going to meet with Whitney to try to convince him to, like, well, hey, like, how about we both go on and find this disc that they are trying to blackmail Lex with. And so Clark and Whitney go on and find this disc as Clark is to use his X-ray vision. And it's funny how, like, we go on to, like, Tom now remembering that they use, like, the X-ray vision that often. And I think they do really use it almost, like, as a every episode kind of thing. But hey, like, how can you remember all of this? And when really looking at it, like, I can't blame Tom for like saying that kind of thing, because when really looking at it, there's so many things going on in this show. How can you remember how many times you've used the X-ray vision, and how many times can you say that you haven't used it in the show? We also had Tom, who is to go with Pete to the Smallville Savings and Loan and X-ray this bank door and find out that one of the guys is to now be an amputee, because of course the one time where it failed, this guy had lost his arm, but luckily it was in a place where this guy could have easily lost the arm and he would have been fine, weirdly enough. So, but I thought it was kind of cool that they added that to this story, kind of showing like a different side of a character than the normal kind of like, okay, like, let's make all these characters the same. No, they tried to really make all of the criminals like unique, or the thieves very unique in a way. So Clark finds, by using his X-ray vision, the disc, and then they're like, okay, I got it, let's get out of here. And that all of a sudden has Wade and Derek and Scott, who are all just like, well, okay, you guys are dead now. Which leads Lex to come in and try to taser one of these guys and take them down. And funny thing of it is, we have Lex who uses a taser in this episode, and the guy that Lex goes up against in the next episode, he ends up using a taser to take Lex out. I'm wondering if they just like they just borrowed that from the other episode. Just like, hey man, we have this taser here. Can we just kind of work this into this episode? Yeah, that sounds great. Like, we just have this prop laying around. Like, we might as well just use it. Like, wouldn't it be funny if that would just be the weapon of choice for like every episode for a long stretch of time, so they can just keep reusing that taser prop consistently? Just be like, oh my god, that same taser prop is being used like every episode. Oh my god, they're figuring out a way to just write it in every episode. So we go on, and eventually what ends up happening here is we start to have people getting separated, and Whitney is to almost get killed here by having this car drop upon him. And so what happens is Clark ends up using his super speed to grab Whitney before this vehicle falls, and then it seems to fall on top of Wade, killing him, possibly. There isn't a definitive like blood trail, or like, you would have to assume that it ended up crunching on top of him, but so Merrick is to be there while realizing that the cops are making their way down. So these thieves are, of course, to get arrested. They are to file this report, and so really, I think by the end of this, I want to try to think that there's possibly like another Lana and Clark moment that go into this episode, from what I can remember, where it seems that Clark and Lana had this heart-to-heart, where it almost kind of seems that it might be a little bit of the episode of maybe Lana talking to Clark about Whitney, and that like they're also talking about their friendship. It's kind of a very like generic line of things. Like, this dialogue between them doesn't really head anywhere, but we have this nice moment where like the last thing you see in the episode is like Lana looking at the camera. She's like, and then like they end the episode that way. But to me, like, there's nothing that I remember from that dialogue that really sticks out to me that says like I needed to have remembered this. Plus, also, I ended up seeing this like yesterday, and well, technically yesterday before I hit the hay. So it's kind of like trying to remember all this from after going to sleep, because when I was to try to go on and review this, I couldn't on and actually do the video, but I could watch the content. So going into episode 14, we of course in episode 14 have a cast of uh, people that are all to be in this club called Zero Consequences, or Club Zero, to I guess to be precise, is what it's usually to be called here. So, come to find out, Lex is to bring within this club a woman named Amanda. And so Lex is to be at the door, and it seems that there is to be this new bouncer at this club who doesn't know who Lex Luthor is. Maybe I wouldn't even know who Lex Luthor is if I was to be a bouncer at a club anyways. But wouldn't that be just a cool role to play? Uh, even though you would have to go on and you would have to deal with drunken people who you would have to go on and figure out a way to muscle them out of a bar, which I used to be a strong guy, chewing up the word again, used to. Me now, like, not as much as I was, because really, there was a perfect time of me, like, having, like, the perfect way to, like, be very strong at one period of time. But, like, now, I don't think I can get back to being that strong. But yeah, but that was just an interesting window of time. Plus, also like dealing with all like the consistent just pain of that experience being sore all of the time, to where it's like rarely ever really sleeping, because every little toss and turn would be like this or this or the, yeah, and that sucked. Cry me a river when the pizza delivers if you can. But anyways, going on. So we have Lex going into this club with Amanda, and Kawinka Dinkley. Lex goes on and does this for a reason, because Lex was to go on and say that he was to go in this club thinking that he was going to go in here alone, but then Amanda's like, well, I'm sure if I would have not come with you, you probably would have found a girl quickly anyways. So Lex is to go on into this club, and we have this kind of OC kind of moment where all of a sudden Lex is to be with Amanda, and all of a sudden they turn to have Amanda going on and finding Jude, who is to be her future husband, on a couch with two other women, and he is going on and yeah, like, I'm with these women partying it up. And so Amanda's like, oh my god, Jude, how could you? Kind of thing. And then she storms off, and Lex is running after her. But actually before Lex does that, we have Jude who's like, oh my god, Lex, you did that on purpose. How could you? And Lex is like, you did that on yourself. Like, you're the one who ends up, like, consistently bouncing from woman to woman. Like, can't there just be one woman for you, Jude? Can't there be? That isn't the line that is to be delivered in this episode, but I thought it was a funny addition to just add in here. Jude, how could you? Just really paraphrasing here and having fun. So, Lex goes and chases after Amanda, which leads Jude to then be chasing after Lex, to then want to go into fisticuffs. So, we all of a sudden have this strobe lighting that all of a sudden I guess is to hide where there might not have been an actual punch being thrown at a person. Because in a lot of movies and a lot of shows, and I've seen this because I've watched like the Celtic Warrior workout now, where there was this one guy who was to be this kind of stunt performer, and the way, of course, that they go on and do punches and kicks and stuff like that is there's like a certain angle that they present these kind of punches and kicks to make it look like it's real, but actually it's kind of like one of these kind of things where it's like the fist is going in this direction or in this direction, and it's not even anywhere close to actually hurting the person or like even grazing against the wind of their hair. And that's what happens quite a bit of times. Is it feels like the kick is happening right then and there, but actually it's not. It's really just clever camera angle and like making things look close enough to or fast enough to where it's like, oh, okay. And you can't go on and easily like pause the clip either and see that it's like, oh yeah, that missed by a mile. Anyways, pushing on. You can kind of see it in pro wrestling every once in a while, where that like some of the punches are just like, but like when really looking at it, they're having to perform for a crowd, not only like the people at home. So it is what it is. So we have Jude grab Lex. They do the strobe lighting punches. And eventually what happens is Jude is to whip out this gun and want to kill Lex here for what he has gone and done by possibly ruining his marriage. And what we end up seeing supposedly in the beginning of this story, or maybe, no wait, maybe Jude had a knife. Because, yeah, I think Jude had a knife. That's what, like guns and stuff like that. So Jude has a knife that stabs into Lex. And eventually, Jude then is to then be like, you ruined my marriage, blah, 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 blah. So Lex goes on and whips out this gun and is to go on and shoot Jude and kill him. And so Sam Phelan, who we've seen in episodes before, is to come back to then go on and is to try to pay everybody off. There's to be this the guy at the club who's called Max, who had let Lex into this club, who is to get paid off here, and Phelan is to say like, well, any of these witnesses are all going to get this smile on their faces because they're going to get this massive payday courtesy of Lionel Luthor. And then Phelan is to go on and tell Lex, it's like, hey, go to this man, who goes on and is to like sew people up without any questions, aka the guy from episodes before. So that whole part of the story where Lex was to go with Amanda to this club was like 3 years ago. So that whole story was taking place 3 years ago. Now back to current day. So we have Chloe, Clark, and Pete, who are all in the class, in school, doing a thing, slapping it down. So, come to find out, they are to have a project, of course, about them needing to interview somebody to get what they need to know about certain people. So, it seems that Chloe is to go on and get Clark. I don't know who Pete ended up getting. And Clark ended up getting Lana because of course he did. And you could probably tell by the smile on his face that of course he got Lana because of course he did. So we of course have Chloe who's asking Clark, it's like, well, hey, like, can we have some alone time so you and me can go on and do this interview? And Clark is like, yeah, rain check. We're going to see that throughout this whole entire episode. That's that Clark is coming up with some kind of like, oh yeah, I'm helping Lana, like put together her, like refurbish her cinema. So I'm busy. I'm sorry, Chloe. I'm sorry. I'm busy. I got things to do. So we have at one point where Clark is to want to go on and eventually meet with Lex. And so Lex, of course, is to bump into Max again. And Max is to go on and say, like, hey man, like the guy from our past, like he showed up. And Lex is just like, oh wow, really? Like, yeah, Jude. Like, so, and Jude's looking for you, Lex. And so eventually when Clark is to meet up with Lex and ask Lex, like, hey, who was that guy? And Lex is like, oh, that was nobody. And Clark is like, huh? Like, Lex, you're keeping secrets from me, buddy? What kind of garbage is that, Lex? Thought we were friends. Thought you told me in an episode before that our friendship will be the thing of legend. All of a sudden now you're lying to me? I'm hurt, Lex. I'm hurt. So, but I feel that that's probably not exactly enough with the whole Lex Clark thing here, but I'm just going to just pin it on that. So, come to find out, Lana is to find out from Nell that Nell is going to sell the flower shop and the cinema because of stuff that I had said before about Nell not being able to compete with the multiplex and all these other things, and plus also with eventually years down the road when COVID starts to kick in, yeah, there's going to be a possibility that some businesses are just going to crumble, sadly enough. But anyways, so Lana is to be like, well, I need to go on and I need to save this theater at least because that was a place that my mother and my dad, when they met together, and like Lana has this whole story about her father kind of working at this movie theater, and for some reason Lana's mother was kind of ditching this movie to go on and try to talk to this guy, and that led to eventually them dating and then eventually having Lana. So Lana has that whole story that she's like, well, no, I gotta save the Talon because I gotta save the memory of my parents. So, and come to find out, Lex is to be the buyer of basically the Talon and the flower shop and the whatever. So Lana goes on to talk to Lex and is trying to convince him to save this movie theater. And Lex is like, well, why? Like, what business sense does it make to save this? And Lana's just like, well, because, like, my parents met here. Like, that's the reasoning. And Lex is like, there's gotta be more than that. Like, this town needs a parking garage, and, like, you gotta hit me with something better than that. You gotta hit me with some sweet stuff, if you know what I mean. You gotta hit me with the good stuff, Lana. Come on! Again, trying to be funny, and it's not working. Pushing on. So, come to find out, Lex... why do I keep saying Lex when I want to say Clark? Because they're one and the same person. It's Fight Club all over again. Clark makes his way home to find out that Chloe is to just, like... Man, does she just want to know all kinds of information about Clark. To the point of Chloe now asking both Jonathan and Martha about Clark, considering, like, Chloe is like, well, like, I want to, like, clear A on this project, because Clark was to say that he was to only have spent, like, an hour with Lana and get the gist of who she was, for him to easily be able to make this paperwork. And so instead, it seems that Chloe is going really in depth about Clark. And so Clark is watching, of course, Chloe doing this interview with Clark's parents. And we then have Clark who's like, hey, like, I didn't know that she was going to be so, like, thorough about this. And Jonathan and Martha's like, yeah. So eventually there's, like, a moment where it's like, yeah, there's some dicey things that have gone on with Clark getting adopted, and Chloe is to find that out and just throw it into Clark's face. because of the episode that happened before. So Chloe is to go on and find out that there was some suspicious stuff about Clark's adoption papers, and so she finds these papers and gives them to Clark, and so Clark is now like, he's like, I didn't want to know anything about my parents. Like, they must have not really loved me. They probably hated me. They didn't want me to know who they were. And you're bringing up all these like these wounds and this and that I wanted to try to forget, Chloe. But no, Chloe, you have to go on and you have to remind me that I'm an orphan and that I was adopted by the Kents. How could you? Why am I going with that line consistently within this review? Because it is what it is. Pushing on. So, we are to know we have to go into the villain in this episode. We do. So, we have a guy who is to be Jude, and he is dangling Lex upside down, going on and trying to ask him questions about the past, like what is the real truth here. And so come to find out, Jude at some point is to find Lex, is to taser him, put him into this van, and drive him off to this location where he is questioning Lex about what had all happened. Because eventually we have a person who is also in here that is to want to know the full story because he doesn't know, and so he's pushing this other guy to be his puppet on the string. So we have a moment that does lead up also to Lex getting tasered and getting taken, and I'll talk about that now. We also, we had Jude, who is to go to Lana's movie cinema as it's getting repaired, and he tries to apply to a job there, and Lex ends up finding out that this guy applied, and he's like, oh my god, it's the same guy, it's the name, oh no. Even though he doesn't physically see this guy, he's like, oh, it's the guy, it's the name, it's oh my god. So Clark and Jonathan at the farm, this to me is to kind of come off as like a Yellowstone kind of moment. And you could probably say that maybe Yellowstone got so popular maybe because of shows like Smallville, where it's a barn and so on and so forth. Kind of bringing it back to Kevin Costner and the fact that he was in technically a Superman film, and also that Yellowstone is a pretty decent show for the most part. So, come to find out, Jonathan and Clark are at the barn and talking about the adoption papers. And so eventually Jonathan is to realize that there's no noises going on with the cattle that they bizarrely now have in this episode. I'm like, when have we ever seen cattle before? How is it all of a sudden we see this cattle now? Huh? I'm so confused. Like, I thought that they were just like doing corn or something. Like, I thought Clark had said that they like were to try to like make corn like a priority for farming before. Now, all of a sudden, Jonathan has cattle? Anyways, so, come to find out, all of his cattle ends up getting poisoned, and we see these Luthor Corp logos all over these barrels, and we have Jonathan who's like, oh my god, I knew the Luthors were going to do something bad, and this is it. So Jonathan is now ticked, and so Lex is to go on and tell Jonathan, it's like, hey, I'm willing to pay for all of your cattle and compensate you for all these problems, so on and so forth. And now we have both Clark and we have both Jonathan that are just ticked at Lex, even though, because they don't know if he did it or not. Like, Clark wants to give Lex the benefit of the doubt, but like, this looks really bad. But then Lex goes on and gets scooped away And so we have Clark that is to finally go on and meet with Chloe. And Clark has to come up with another reason for him ditching out on Chloe. And so Chloe's like, Clark, like, wait a moment. Like, just stand here for a moment and just answer some questions. Like, Clark, are you just trying to avoid me? Was it all the kissing that we had a number of episodes ago? Is that's what is just kind of making you uneasy, Clark? She didn't say that, but I wanted that to go have come up. Um, and Clark is like, no, I'm not avoiding you. Like, if anything, like when I went on with Lana, like I spent like an hour with her, and like I could easily figure out the whole paperwork. And I don't understand why, Chloe, that you're going so in depth about all this, and you're ruining my life in the process, and you're pushing so hard. And so Chloe's realizing that she really needs to back off here, and so she goes on and does so. So now Jude is questioning, of course, Lex here, and is dangling upside down, kind of in the one kind of conspiracy moment where Patrick Stewart is asking Mel Gibson, like, who else knows, Jerry? Who else knows? Nobody knows. So Lex is losing his mind here because he's being dangled upside down. And I'm kind of wondering how long in the episode he was really and truly dangled upside down for. Because when really thinking about it, like you really have to go on and legitimately hang someone upside down, and like there has to be so many things that have to be put in place to before, like, so like I want to know, like, for how long Lex was really dangling there. And also, like, I was kind of curious, like, if they did those scenes at the same time, like the kind of breaking where you see him dangling in the beginning of this thing, and then you see him dangle again, and then they go on with the rest of the scenes. So Lex is to be talking with supposedly Jude here, and so Lex is talking to this guy and is to find out that this guy doesn't know what happened to himself, that he ended up getting shot. And supposedly there ends up being a real person behind the curtain, and we end up finding out that that was none other than the repairman who was questioning Lana for how these repairs are really going to go within the movie theater. And come to find out, this guy had pretended that he had gotten bludgeoned by Jude from before. And so this guy goes on to become Amanda's brother, I believe, who wanted to know why Jude was to go on and take her own life after Jude's death. So Lex finally has to confess to this repairman that what really happened is Lex did not fire that shot. It was actually Amanda who fired this shot on Jude herself. And Lex ended up taking the blame because he was a rich kid, and Lex immediately knew that Lionel would come in and swoop in and save the day. So that way Lex wouldn't have jail time. And when eventually Clark meets up with Lex after saving Lex yet again here, they bring up that point of just like, oh, well, Lex, like, you obviously wanted to save and protect Amanda from going to jail, and so you tried to do the right thing there. So we have Clark swooping in, taking out this repairman, and then freeing Lex from his being hung upside down. So by the tail end of this, we have this kind of Daredevil like moment where, because if you guys remember the Ben Affleck movie Daredevil, we're by the end of that. We have the one reporter who's thinking like, should I print this? Should I not print this? That Matt Murdock is the Daredevil. Spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen the Netflix show or what eventually will become the Disney Plus show that might get redone here, or eventually seeing the Ben Affleck movie that. Obviously, Matt Murdock is Daredevil, if people don't know that. And plus, that's also another Marvel thing that I'm referencing here. Also, I'm wearing a Ghost Rider shirt, which is kind of funny because this is another Marvel thing and I'm wearing a DC thing. It is what it is. So, Chloe is to then not go on and print this story that obviously Clark has to be Superman, and she's figured it out. She knows that Clark has powers. She's pieced it together, and now she's not going to confront Clark about it. She's just going to put in some Torch interview that, yeah, he's Superman. We know now. Or wait, he'll be the Blur. He's the Blur. He's the Blur, everybody. No, that is far too soon for this show to even go anywhere close to any of that stuff. It goes way later, right around the Alicia parts where, or the Alicia storyline where we start to get some really interesting people who end up getting to know certain things within the show. So, with that said, hopefully that covers most of what is to have gone on within this review. I'm going to try to quickly get out of here because also there might have been a number of things that I had forgotten about here because I didn't quickly watch this and review it like I normally would. But yeah, I would go on and say that these episodes are probably not as good as other ones, but like they have to be at least a little bit better than episode 6 because we still have some like more creative stories, even though because I just don't like episode 6. I just don't. So I feel like these episodes are probably like okay question mark, but yeah, but at least we still got some interesting ways about going about this that were some kind of fun, kind of whodunit kind of things. And so that's it. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.